I'd like to call to order the City of Littleton City Council meeting for Tuesday, December 17, 2019. Roll call, please.
Mayor Valdez.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Malin.
Present.
Councilmember Driscoll.
Here.
Councilmember Elrod. Here. Councilmember Fay.
Here.
Councilmember Grove.
Here.
Councilmember Milliman.
Present.
Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That was a little bit like singing with Willie Nelson.
Hearing that voice.
Everybody was off a little bit.
It's good at Pledge of Allegiance.
All right, council, looking for approval of minutes. Are there any changes?
The agenda first, sir.
I'm sorry, I meant the agenda. Council, the approval of the agenda, any changes? Nope, so approved. All right, we'll move on to comments and reports from the city manager.
Mr. Mayor, no report this evening.
Okay, city attorney.
No report this evening.
Council, we'll begin with Councilmember Milliman. Any reports?
I attended the Tri-County meeting last Friday. It was my first one. It was very interesting. Quite a few speakers, legislators from around the area talking about what their priorities are and challenges facing our state with regard to public health. Interestingly, they have a 5-year plan that they're doing right now, and they take a survey of residents within the state of Colorado. And, right now, the #1 top priority or challenge for our state is food insecurity, which I felt was very interesting versus affordable housing. So anyway, that's it.
Thank you. All right. Councilmember Grove.
No report.
Councilmember Fay.
Two members, or two employees of All Health Network, one of them is the co-responder with our police department when there is a call of somebody who possibly needs mental health type help. Those two people and I met with the Centura Health overall umbrella, and that includes Littleton Hospital and Porter Hospital, and we were asking them how we could work together on addressing the issue of homelessness policy. So this is a continuation of the Tri-Cities Homelessness Policy Group, and really wonderfully surprising thing is that the two administrators that we worked with said that the hospitals are now required by Medicaid, in order for Medicaid to pay them, to participate in the mental health, improving the mental health of the community, and in improving food security. So this all fits together, and they were really pleased that we arrived to work together with them on solving several problems at once. So a really positive step forward there.
Great, thank you. All right, Mr. Driscoll.
Yes, I want to remind people that we lost Chief Troy Jackson with the South Metro Fire, and his funeral will be held on this Friday, the 20th, at the First Denver Church at 11 o'clock. So anybody that knew Troy or has any connections with the South Metro Fire Department, we would love for you to attend.
Thank you very much.
A couple of things. From the last Dr. Cog meeting, we had two presentations. One was from the I-70 Coalition, and what's really great about this coalition, it's 27 partners, public and private sector, with its purpose is to improve the conditions of I-70 as it relates to congestion, et cetera. So, couple of key areas is highway improvements, high-speed transit, and non-infrastructure improvements is what they're working on. One of the reasons that the private sector, of course, is so vested in this as well is because of the economic impact that congestion and traffic has on the sector. Some updates is, so the eastbound express lane, as many that travel the mountain corridor know, is open, and they are going to extend that on the westbound express lane. And they are also working on incentivizing within the Front Range when people are going to the mountains, so that instead of that Saturday or Sunday morning congestion, to leave on Fridays or Mondays. So, what happens in the mountains is obviously a factor to our quality of life, and vice versa. So that continues, and a really strong coalition there. The second was from CDOT, and they're undergoing their planning process as well. 3 key areas that they're focused on, first being road condition and safety. This is statewide. Growth and congestion, number 2, and lack of travel options, number 3. So when looking at lack of travel options, it's really looking at public transportation, even in the, not just in the urban areas, but obviously even in the rural areas as the population ages and being able to get around. So that's the updates from a transportation front.
All right, thank you very much. All right,
I've got one.
Scott, or Mr. Millen.
So I went to the LPS board meeting last Thursday and introduced myself as City Council's new liaison to the school board. They thanked City Council for our commitment to the school resource officer program, including, of course, sharing the cost of those officers. I believe the most important takeaway from the meeting as far as council is concerned is that the school board, in conversation with its long-range planning commission, has started a conversation about redrawing LPS enrollment boundaries. They're concerned about socioeconomic balance in the schools, adjusting enrollment numbers, and they're very interested in not having to bus students east-west across the city. Santa Fe, from their perspective, is a real obstacle, so are Broadway and University. So they focus most of their attention on the elementary schools, but also discussed, to a lesser extent, the middle and high schools. Some of the proposals being considered are consolidating Franklin and Highland into one school on the Franklin campus, with a new school being built, consolidating East and Moody into one school on the Moody campus, again with a new school being built, and building a new school on the Ames campus. They're considering using the capital improvements money, voters approved to build 3 new elementary schools and a new middle school. This was just the beginning of their conversation about redrawing these enrollment boundaries. There will be public comment opportunities coming up in January, so check the LPS website for that info. Another important part of the meeting was Superintendent Ewert recognizing the many LPS schools who have recently received various awards. For example, Lenski Elementary was recognized as a blue ribbon school, so certainly a reminder of the excellence of the district.
Great. Thank you, Pro Tem. All right. I have no report tonight. We have no citizens' appearances tonight, so we'll move on to public comments. If you wish to address the City Council under public comments, please sign in on the public speaker form before the call to order for this meeting. That would have been this thing. Public comments has the opportunity to express opinions or ask questions regarding issues that are not part of the public hearing on tonight's agenda. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes. The City Council is not authorized by the Colorado Open Meetings Law to discuss, comment, or take action at the meeting on any issue raised by a public comment that is not part of tonight's agenda. The mayor may refer the matter to the city manager or city attorney for immediate comment after public comment, or to staff to obtain additional information and report back to council as appropriate. Please expect comments. We expect comments to be civil. Disrespectful and disruptive behavior will not be tolerated. And if you did not sign up on the list, there will be an opportunity. First one on our list is Jennifer Julek? Gudish. Thank you very much. On deck is just as easy to read as
As you can imagine,
Karina Johnson.
I have problems with that frequently.
How was that?
Yes, spelled G-U-E-D-D-I-C-H-E.
Pronounced?
Jennifer.
Pronounced how again?
Gadish.
Gadish, thank you. Okay, thank you. And your name and address, please.
Yes, 3195 East Phillips Drive, Centennial, 80122. Good evening, my name is Jennifer Gadish. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of a nonprofit organization called the Rocky Mountain Welcome Center. I'm also a resident, I have a child in Littleton Public Schools, and I sit on the board of Immigrant Pathways Colorado. I'm here tonight, and by the way, Susan Thornton sends her regards. Today I'm reaching out to ask for your help during a really critical time in the history of the U.S. resettlement program. This is the U.S. Refugee Resettlement Program. And this is at a time that will impact Colorado's long-standing tradition of welcoming refugees that are fleeing war, violence, and persecution. As a member of the Immigrant Pathways Board, I know how generous this community is and how welcoming of diverse communities it has been. In the past years, the state of Colorado has welcomed more than 25 refugees annually as part of the U.S.'s population of about 70,000. This program has been changed drastically over the past 2 years. The number of refugees entering the United States this year will be 30,000. Populations that are coming to the country through the U.S. refugee program are Congolese, special immigrant visas who were Iraqi interpreters for the U.S. military, also Afghani individuals who provided interpretation services for the U.S. military in Afghanistan. We still receive some folks from Ethiopia, Eritrea, as well as Burma. On September the 26th, President Trump issued an executive order that drastically changes the way the U.S. refugee program works. There is now a requirement for the refugee programs to receive local consent. So we're here tonight to ask your consideration of passing a resolution that would provide local consent that would allow refugees to be resettled in your community, with a reminder that the majority of refugees are resettled in Denver and Aurora. However, once people arrive in the United States, they're free to pick up and move elsewhere. So if a refugee family were resettled, for example, in Aurora, and decided to relocate to Littleton to live with family, they would no longer be eligible for the refugee services that are provided by the state, as well as about 45 different nonprofits in the state of Colorado. So I'd ask you to consider passing a resolution of local consent that would welcome these newcomers to your community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right. Legina Johnson. Thank you. And on deck will be Bailey Johnson.
Hi, it's Cayena, spelled C-A-Y-E-N-N-A Johnson, and I live at 2469 South Oswego Street, Aurora, Colorado, 80014.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Cayena Johnson. As I said, I'm a mom, and I'm a small business owner, and I also work for the state of Colorado as unaccompanied refugee minor program coordinator. I've been working in the field of refugee resettlement for the last 15 years, and I'm here today to ask you to support a passage of a consent resolution that would allow newly arriving refugees to be placed in Littleton in compliance with the Executive Order 13888. You heard a little bit about the Executive Order previously and the need for that. I just want to, speak about my program specifically. So in the unaccompanied refugee minor program, the Lutheran Family Services Rocky Mountains certifies and licenses foster parents, and refugee youth are placed with these foster parents in all kinds of cities around the metro area in the Front Range, and Littleton is one of those cities. So in order for that foster family to be eligible to receive a youth, a child or a teenager whose parents were deceased or missing, you would need to pass this resolution. Otherwise, this foster family would not be able to receive the child. Refugee resettlement is a huge thing for me. I've been working in it in the last 15 years. It's a wonderful way to spend my life. It doesn't pay well, but like folks who serve the public, like in city council, for instance, it's just something that we feel called to do, to serve other people and participate in the betterment of humanity in this way. And this executive order has been a challenge, but it's also been incredibly fulfilling to see the community support for refugees in Colorado. So my email will be available if anybody has any questions after this about the programs. I'd be happy to answer them, and thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. All right, Bailey Johnson. And Brooklyn Johnson. All right. We're getting tagged twice here. Hey, ladies.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. My name is Bailey Johnson, and this is my sister, Brooklyn Johnson. We are in 3rd grade at Moody Elementary, and we live in Littleton. We are here to ask the council to consider changing the way you clear the snow and ice from the neighborhood streets in Littleton. This year, the streets in our neighborhood were very icy for a long time after it snowed, and that made it dangerous for our parents and neighbors to drive safely. We believe the roads in neighborhoods should be cleared along with the main roads. The 2019 budget for snow and ice removal supplies was $135,000. If that is not enough money to make sure all streets are clear of ice, then we are asking the council to vote to increase the budget for next year. We have collected signatures from our school to support our request, which we would like to give to you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Let me say really quickly, I met Brooklyn and Bailey when I went to their class to talk about local government a couple of weeks ago, and I told all the kids that if you want to come down to public comment, you absolutely should, and I am super proud of the two of you for coming down. Thank you so much.
Excellent. All right, and last on our list will be Ms. Carol Brezak.
It's not fair to follow kids.
This better be good.
Yeah. I'm Carol Brezak. I live in the 4th District. 2 weeks ago, I came before you and highlighted a section of the city charter regarding fire services. The charter states that the council is responsible for providing the fire service, and my question to you was how you intend to fulfill your sworn obligation to uphold the charter and provide fire service to the citizens of Littleton. During that meeting, our city attorney, whom I believe is a great addition to our city staff, responded to my comments but did not answer the question. So I'm here tonight to respond to his response. It was said that the charter is out of date, referencing this section of the charter, 104. To pretend that the charter is out of date is unacceptable. Our charter is our Constitution. The charter was written and approved by citizens. It serves as a roadmap for the elected representatives to follow. It protects the citizens from government. What is the purpose of having a charter if it can be violated so easily by the very people elected to follow it? As evidence of the charter being out of date, reference was made to the section providing a volunteer fire department. This section of the charter was just reaffirmed by the voters in November 2015. They were asked to delete the language, but the voters said no. They want an option for a volunteer fire department. Our charter reads as it should, just as when it was approved by the voters. The truth is, the charter was violated by the previous council when they gave away our fire department and fire assets. But it sounds much better to say that the charter is out of date than to say that the charter was violated, and now the council cannot fulfill their sworn obligation. The point I'm trying to make is that you were elected to represent the citizens. That means you need to question the matters before you, just as a citizen would. Your job requires you to go beyond the materials provided to you by staff. You need to listen to the concerns of the citizens, and you need to know the charter and the codes well enough to defend them when necessary. You took an oath to do so. I am hopeful with this new council that we might see a new culture, a council with a better rapport with the citizens, one where citizens are taken seriously, one where the questions asked by citizens are important enough to be answered. You have a real opportunity as a new council to make some needed changes in how the council works with and represents the citizens. Again, I wish you well on your newly elected positions, and I'll end with, my question remains unanswered. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. And that was good, but the two ladies before you.
We're younger.
We're younger, yes. There you go, okay. Thank you very much. Is there anybody else that would like to speak that is not on our list?
I'm going to need the projector. Great. Okay, thank you.
There we go.
Yep. All right. So my name is Pam Chapborn. I live a block and a half from here. Again, I'm not going to compete with those two ladies. This won't be nearly like that. Land use, but I do agree with what Carol Brezak said, and I look forward to a culture change from this council. I'm going to talk about land use planning for strong and informed city design. I'm not going to talk tonight about the information presented to council at the study session Tuesday about the developer plan for downtown Littleton, but I find it outrageous that our staff is presenting a developer's intention to take over downtown, and our community development staff is presenting that to you as something great. It's not. So actually, I'll just read this. I talked to your council. I also was able to talk to your city attorney, and I thank you for his time and his information. And he works for you, but you folks work for the people in the city. So I also hope to talk with community development about city planning. And my statement is that cities are technical systems, and we need to understand those technical systems, and specifically land use principles and zoning as the technical tool to implement those principles, and then city planning tools, which are available to assure that zoning achieves those principles and goals. And you and we need a tutorial on our current zoning. We have no business changing the current zoning before we understand the pros and cons of our current zoning. Cities, I'm going to repeat, are technical systems, and you cannot manage what you do not measure. We've got to have city planning estimating tools to understand what's going on. A couple of things that are limited in the city that your decisions impact and that you can cause to run out and have no more of for yourselves or future councils or the city: traffic capacity. If decisions are made that increase traffic to the point that we have gridlock, we're kind of done. And you've changed the city forever. Downtown parking is a consumable. There's a limit. And land uses. And I don't have time to talk about the rest of this, but, and budget. So we need some planning tools, and something I wanted to show is, an example is, we've rezoned a lot of land from job-producing land uses to residential. These are 5 projects that were rezoned from business, industrial, or schools to residential. 113 acres, council, in recent years have been converted from job-producing uses to residential. How much more can we do before we run out of our ability to have jobs in the city and budget and income to our budget?
Thank you, ma'am.
So that's my start there.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Seeing no one else. City manager, city attorney, would you have any comments?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Forgive me my continuing saga with my voice. At least I'm not coughing here. Apologize. The city has been contacted by an organization, rescue.org, and specifically has been asking the city to consider this issue that came up here this evening with a couple of our presenters about a resolution for local consent for immigrants and refugees. We have asked them to coordinate their correspondence through my office, We are doing due diligence with this particular issue. We are evaluating the executive order. We've actually been looking and contacted the issue here with the Colorado Municipal League. And so before I recommend action here to our council, we're doing our due diligence. And so that's been kind of the message back to this organization. We do hope to do that as quickly as we can. And so it's kind of a comment on that particular issue. Appreciate the Bailey girls on the issue of snow removal. I obviously commented on this here a couple of weeks ago and realized that a lot of our citizens felt like we missed the mark on our snow removal. We acknowledge that. We have been trying to evaluate different ways to kind of manage that. Some of the conditions were perhaps unique, but there are ways for us to improve that service. At some point, we'll share that conclusion here with council, but we recognize that we can do better on that front. And that's my comments here for this evening, Mayor.
Thank you. City Attorney, anything?
I think I'll be responding to Ms. Breziak's comment regarding the charter provision that requires the city to provide fire service. You know, in terms of what I said at the last meeting, that there are some areas that probably need to be cleaned up within our charter. You know, this particular issue in providing fire service was something that the city did until the city went to the electors of the city of Littleton on a vote, 7B. And I believe at that time, on November 6th, 2018, on a vote of 59% in favor and 41% against, this city and the electors of the city agreed that South Metro should take over Littleton Fire. So it was at that time, well, technically beginning of January 1st, 2019, that the fire service, by a vote of the people, was transferred over to South Metro. So perhaps council will form a charter review committee, as they do from time to time, to go through areas of the charter to find out if there are any areas that need to be changed, reworded, and ultimately, depending on what council decides and what recommendations the charter review committee provides, that those would be held at the next general election. So.
Great, thank you very much. All right, we'll move on down to our consent agenda items. Consent agenda items can be adopted by a simple motion. All ordinances must be read by title prior to a vote on the motion. The consent agenda item may be removed at the request of a council member. Our first one, ordinance 31-2019, an ordinance on first reading granting the removal of a renewal of a non-exclusive franchise agreement for the city right-of-way with Comcast. Resolution 70-2019, approving the transfer of budget funds between departments.
Pull.
Have that pulled?
I'm sorry, who pulled
I'm sorry,
that?
Mr. Driscoll.
Thank you.
Motion to approve, and this is ID number 20-338, motion to approve the 2019/2021 council liaison to board and commissions and additional outside appointments. And there was but a couple things that Council Member Elrod wanted to make sure. There were some subcommittees that she wanted to make sure we have on there too. So, also, let's see, ID number 19-329, approval of the December 3, 2019 regular minutes with some correction of typos that the Pro Tem had pointed out. Council?
I move to approve consent agenda items A, C, and D.
Thank you. We have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. Council, ready to vote? Yes vote is to approve.
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Council. We'll go back to Resolution 70-2019. Mr. Driscoll.
Yes, Mark, I was just needing a refresher as to why we were transferring these funds and what was the reason your department needed those. Was that a raise for you? Or?
It is Christmas.
Thank you, Councilmember Driscoll. The purpose of this is that by charter, the council actually has to approve the transfer of funds from one department to another. When Kathleen Osher was originally hired, she was within both the Community Development and Public Works Department, at least funded by those two departments. And the whole purpose for Kathleen, of course, was to kind of coordinate the effort here for our comprehensive plan and our transportation master plan. Over the course of the past year, I've shared with council the intent to permanently have Kathleen within the city manager's office to coordinate not just the next step within the comprehensive plan, but also to implement a series of strategies over time that are really kind of necessary to be coordinated out of the city manager's office. And examples of that would be a housing strategy or an economic development strategy. All of these live perhaps in other departments, but it's essential, in my view, to make sure that the city manager's office has an opportunity to kind of coordinate the affected departments and really kind of help guide and be a resource to the department for issues like citizen engagement more specifically. So again, this is just a formal step to kind of move the funds from one department to another. There is no budget impact. The net is zero.
Thank you.
Council, I need a motion for Resolution 70-2019.
Motion to approve, motion for consent of Resolution 70-2019, approving the transfer of budget funds between departments.
Second.
Great, we have a second. Council, ready to vote? Yes vote is approved.
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
Is Pam doing a light show over there? Is that... Okay, sorry. All right, we have no general business tonight. We'll move on to ordinances on second reading and public hearings. We'll move on to Ordinance 30-2019, an ordinance on second reading, amending ordinance number 39, series of 2018, known as the Annual Appropriations Bill for the municipal purposes of the City of Littleton, counties of Arapahoe, Douglas, and Jefferson, State of Colorado, for the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2019 and ending December 31, 2019. And council is presenting. Oh, Tiffany, there you are. Okay. Thank you.
Good evening, Council.
Howdy.
Before you tonight, there is an ordinance 30-2019 to amend the 2019 annual appropriation. The policy question before you is, does council support this amendment to the 2019 annual appropriation? Just a little background, the budget is obviously a planning document. Needs arise during the year. We may need to change some things. It's pretty common to amend the budget throughout the year. We've had 3 previous amendments, ordinance 2, 6, and 18, primarily related to the comp plan and the transportation master plan, and then encumbrances from the prior year. With this amendment, the ordinance will increase the appropriation to $79,840,791. There are a few funds listed in your council communication. The first one is the general fund. We're asking for an amendment of $180,000. This is primarily related to the city attorney's office and the information technology department. If you recall, throughout the year, with the vacancy of the city attorney, it was necessary for the city to contract with an outside attorney, and with that came additional expenses related to that position and providing services for this city. And then the other item is related to the information technology department. With the change of director in that department and change in staffing, there was a need to also contract some of those or outsource some of those positions throughout the year, and then also do some internal and external recruiting related to those positions. I will like to mention that both of these expenditures were anticipated when preparing the 2020 budget. So we've already accounted for this additional cost in the general fund and rolled that into the 2020 budget estimates. The other one before you is related to Geneva Village. This one wasn't exactly anticipated, so I did provide some information in the council communication related to the ending cash in that fund. While this addition of the expenditure will leave the ending cash less than we would anticipate, we did budget for a $50,000 transfer to this fund in 2020 to accommodate for some of these things. So the ending balance, I believe, is about $89,000, which is close to where we would like that to be for 2020. The other one that is pretty typical is related to employee insurance funds. One is the health insurance fund. We can estimate throughout the year what our claims are going to be since the city is self-funded, but we're not always sure how that's going to end. So we've been watching that closely for the last few months, and we do feel like we're going to need an additional appropriation of about $200,000. Kind of a similar effect in the workers' comp plan fund. Looking at the claims that have been coming through, we're going to ask for a $50,000 adjustment there. And then also in the property and liability, we're asking for $50,000. I will tell you that we are closely monitoring these funds, as we always have, and we will continue to look at those throughout the next year and make any necessary adjustments should that arise. The total amendment that we're asking before you tonight is a $506,000 amendment to the total appropriation. Staff does recommend the approval of this ordinance related to the 2019 budget. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Council. Great.
On the employee insurance fund, so that's an increase of $250,000. What is that, an increase of how much percent? What was the fund at and what will it be now?
Give me 1 second. I don't know if I can do that percentage in my head. But.
That's okay. What's it at now or before the increase?
For the health insurance fund, the total appropriation for 2019 was $4.5 million. So I'm not going to guess that, 5%.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Tiffany, can you tell me how much the three previous amendments, can you remind me of those numbers?
The total.
October 2nd, October ordinance 2, 6, and 18.
Sure.
Seems like we're spending a lot of money.
So ordinance number 2 was related to the comp plan and the transportation master plan, and that was an amendment to the impact fee fund of $178,418. That is, again, the impact fee fund. Ordinance number 6 was related to prior year encumbrances. The total across all funds was $3.8 million, but the majority of that was likely in the capital projects fund, which we would have incorporated into our estimates, our 5-year estimates. And then ordinance number 18 was related to council's goals and objectives, and also primarily the $1.8 million that the city received in grant funds related to street projects. And then also there was a Senate bill this previous year that added additional money to local jurisdictions related to streets and maintenance as well. And then a Tabor carryover of Federal and Bowles, I believe, is the intersection.
Thank you.
I have a question. If we're increasing these funds, where's the money coming from?
So related to primarily most of the funds is coming from fund balance, and we do monitor the percentages at the end of each year and the end of the 5 years related to each of those individual funds to make sure that they're within our policy for that. If it's a grant fund, there's a matching revenue that will come in to match that. So the $1.8 million is a revenue in and also an expenditure out of the same amount. So there's no effect on grants.
Anyone else? Mayor Pro Tem?
No, thanks.
Okay, cool. Thank you. All right. Council, looking for a motion. Oh, I'm sorry, public hearing. This is a public hearing tonight. Let's see, I'm sorry. Do you have the script? I don't have it. Close enough? All right, okay. And we have a sign-up list. First one on our list tonight will be Paul Bingham. On deck is Robin Bernstein.
Good evening, new council. I would recommend...
Would give us your name and address.
Oh, I'm sorry, Paul Bingham, I forgot. 236
The young
West-
ladies were right on it.
I've been doing this with you for 15 years, I should know better.
Thank you, thank you.
Oh, shoot, Paul Bingham, 236 West Delaware Circle, Littleton. It sounds to me like this whole thing is justified, and I would especially like to plug the Geneva Village amount. That's $26,000. It's not much. That's a wonderful piece of green campus in the middle of our city, including this building. We need to be doing something to preserve it. I'm afraid we're not, and I think the city, that's my own personal opinion, has ripped off Geneva Village in the past pretty bad. We need to restore some of that, and anyway, recommend approval. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. All right, Robin Bernstein. And on deck will be Pam Chadbourne.
Hello, my name is Robin Bernstein, and I live at Geneva Village. And I feel like I'm doing a service for Geneva Village by speaking up, but I wanted to just say that I would like you all to vote yes for the Geneva Village $26,000 fund. You know, you've already done stuff for it, like the gutters have been cleaned, which took years for that, and this smoke monitor is new. The what else? The carbon monoxide detector, and then they changed the filters. But no, it's needed. We love it, and I'm a yogi, and I feel like I'm doing service for everybody because a lot of them are really old, and they, you know, they don't really get out. So I feel like I'm speaking for them and my animals. So I have cats. They're my companion animals. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Edward.
Jerry, she wasn't talking about you.
Oh, okay. Hey.
Jerry.
Jerry Hill.
I didn't catch it. I was thinking the same thing.
Pam, I got your name right tonight.
Yes, thank you, Jerry.
I didn't call you
It
Paul.
was my writing, I know it was.
I know.
It's not you. So I'm Pam Chadbourne. I still live a block and a half from here, and obviously very close to Geneva Village. I also am here to specifically talk about the asset that Geneva Village is to the city and ask you to approve the $26,000 and more to maintain it. Besides providing housing for people who really need it and don't have many options, Geneva Village, and I'm going to use the language of Ken and Keast, who the city hired to do the comprehensive plan. Geneva Village provides borrowed open space to downtown Littleton. And especially with the infill development, I mean, you can go right out here and see the 10-plex slot house that our former, I'm going to mention as a parenthetical, our former design standards and guidelines would not have allowed. But the revision of the downtown guidelines somehow allowed that 10-plex, the slot house over there, and another one is being built. So those kind of things are infilling all of downtown, and Geneva Village is borrowed open space, which we really need along Prince. It allows everyone who drives by to have a little break. And it's contiguous with the Geneva Park and the city center. And I'm going to tell you, I'm sure you've noticed, when you walk out of this building, you'll see people walking their dogs through the parking lot, and they walk through Geneva Village and the architect's office in the middle. It's used by people for recreation. So, and speaking as a person who lives right near there, it's also a wildlife haven. And we live near the river. We have tributaries to the South Platte, and these are natural wildlife corridors that, as the city becomes more dense, I'm going to ask you to think about preserving. And so you need, I think, every 70 feet, something like 40 to 70 feet, there needs to be some habitat for wildlife. And Geneva Village helps provide that because of the trees. So birds can move up from the river And I enjoy seeing them, and I think as the city gets denser, this wildlife becomes more and more important, and the open space does too. So I'm going to ask you, please, do fund Geneva Village, and thank you for funding it, and thank you for caring for those residents, and thank you for having that open space near my house, and thank you for letting me enjoy the occasional golden eagle, and even the crows that fly back and forth. I love them all, and thank you so much for taking care of Geneva Village.
Okay, thank you. All right. That is it for the list. Does anybody else that would like to speak? All right, we close the public hearing. All right, council.
I move to approve the ordinance on second reading, amending ordinance number 39, series of 2018, known as the Annual Appropriation Bill for all municipal purposes of the City of Littleton, counties of Arapahoe, Douglas, and Jefferson, state of Colorado, for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2019, and ending December 31st, 2019.
Wow.
He does so much better than I do.
Can you repeat that? Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Council, discussion. No, notice, Karina?
No,
What'd you do with Karina?
I'm still here.
Okay, well, we don't have any discussion. Council, are you ready to vote? All right, yes vote is in favor of, and no vote is against. Opposed. Are you ready? I suppose I should vote, huh? Cool.
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, council. All right, we're going to move down to our second item on second reading. We have ordinance 29-2019, an ordinance on second reading approving rezoning of property from IP and IP PDO to PDR located at 241 West Powers Avenue and approving the Delaware and Powers General Plan Development Plan. And presenting tonight is
Good evening, Council. I'm Andrea Mimnall at the Planning Staff, and I'll be making the presentation on this application tonight. I've served as the project manager, but with me also tonight is Denise Stevens, the Director of Economic Development, and Dylan Cowing, an engineer with Public Works Department. Following the staff presentation, the applicant is here and is prepared to make a presentation as well. The applicant is requesting council approval of their application to rezone property at 241 West Powers Avenue. The process for the rezoning requires 3 planning approvals, and the first is the one that is occurring tonight, and that is the rezoning and plan development plan. And council is making the decision on this. It can be approved, denied, or tabled to a date certain. Following the rezoning, if successful, then a subdivision application will be required, and then finally a major site development plan, and that is administrative approval. But however, it can be appealed to the Planning Commission. The Delaware and Powers project is located in the Progress Park neighborhood. You can see it in the vicinity map on the slide. It's located on Powers Avenue and Delaware. And it's the property itself is outlined in yellow. It is north of Littleton Boulevard and west of Broadway. There are a number of surrounding land uses, and they're kind of color-coded in this slide. So what you see in gray to the west, south, and east of the subject property is residential land use. To the north is industrial, that is where the Norgren company is located. And then in red is commercial use. This is a new slide that was added just today in the presentation as a result of a question received by one of the council members regarding height in the neighborhood. And while the city doesn't have specific information on the height of surrounding properties, given that these properties are older, we did want to provide some context. On the west and south sides of the property and the east, there are apartment buildings that range from 1 to 3 stories. And the grade for some of those is a little bit higher than the street. You can see where there are steps that lead up to the front door. Some of those 3-story buildings have garden level as their first level, and so it's a little bit difficult for us to tell the exact height, but generally you can kind of count on about 10 stories, or 10 feet per story for these buildings of this age. So on to the application details. Again, this is the Delaware Empowers development. It does consist of 8.8 acres, and what the applicant is proposing is a maximum of 85 single-family homes. These are detached homes. That results in 10 dwelling units per acre, and the development plan does have some design standards associated with it, and one would be that there would be a park, and you can see that on the illustrative plan on the screen here. It's down at the southwest corner. There would be pedestrian and internal circulation within the lot. Also, you can see that there is parking within the development, and that is guest parking. It's provided at a rate of 0.6 spaces per dwelling unit. And then parking for the units themselves are 2 spaces per unit, and those are in garages. The planned development plan would also bring street trees to all 3 streets that border the property. And there would be a landscaped buffer between the development and the industrial Norgren property to the north. That's a 25-foot buffer, and the applicant has indicated that they would be providing a 5-foot fence along that borderline as part of the screening. This is an illustrative that the applicant presented for the dwelling units themselves. And as you can see, they are contemporary in nature. They are narrow, and they are 35 feet in height, except where a rooftop deck occurs, and in that case, you need an enclosed staircase to get up there, and that height would then lead up to a maximum of 45 feet for those units that have rooftop decks. The distance between the homes is approximately 6 feet, and the building materials do consist of masonry, and masonry can be brick, it can also be cement, and it can be tile. And the applicant has proposed that at least 20% of the front facade of each of those buildings will have some masonry, and that 40% of the buildings will have brick as the masonry component. In addition to masonry components, there would also be allowed metal panel. The city has established review criteria for both rezoning and planned development plan, and there's a full analysis in the written staff report in your packet and on the city website, and I've just highlighted a few of those here for the presentation. The city has looked at the utilities in terms of how the city can provide them for the nature of this development, and found that utilities are in place and that can serve the property. The property can be incorporated into the existing transportation network, There is open space provided at the minimum required amount, and that minimize potential impacts to neighboring properties have been minimized, and that we considered with that density and parking in our analysis. We are looking, of course, at the 2014 comprehensive plan with this application, because the application was submitted earlier this year when the new comprehensive plan had not yet been adopted. So the policies and goals that you see up here are related to 2014 plan. And the 2014 plan does encourage housing of all types. This is certainly one type of housing, single-family housing on small lots. The applicant, however, has not committed at this point to providing affordable or attainable housing. The property is within the Progress Park Neighborhood Plan, which was associated with that 2014 plan, and it talked about limiting high-density residential development. As mentioned earlier, this development is at 10 units per acre, and that is generally considered around a medium-density development. It would be consistent with small single-family homes or townhomes. So in summary, staff has found that the proposed development is consistent with the comprehensive plan and the rezoning and PDR criteria that is stated in the city code. The Planning Commission reviewed the application on October 28th and have recommended approval to City Council of the rezoning application. They did deliberate for 3 hours and talked on many different topics, including the loss of industrial zoned property and the benefits that the development can provide to the city. I would like to add at this time that the city and each council member did receive an email from Pam Chadbourne on Monday, yesterday, around 5:30 in the evening, and that was too late to be included in your packet, and so I would like to ask the city clerk to include that in the record. Okay, just wanted to make sure it was included in the record. The council has several options in acting tonight on the application. Council can approve with conditions. Council can deny it. The council can also continue the public hearing to a date certain. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm available for questions, as are Denise and Dylan.
You said this was a medium density development. What is considered high density?
Well, our comprehensive planning zoning code doesn't necessarily have ranges for what Littleton considers low, medium, and high. I would say, though, that for a townhome development, it's not apartments, it's not single family. They're generally in the neighborhood of 10 dwelling units per acre, as is this single family home development.
Patrick, has any other applicants, this property's been by Norgren forever, and it's zoned industrial. How long has this property been on the market, and has anybody else expressed interest in developing this piece of property into commercial or industrial?
We checked on the property when it first went on the market, which was 2011. This was confirmed by a representative agent at Cushman Wakefield. And our database shows that it has been on the market for approximately 53 months, 16 days, which would lead back to that original market date of 2011. And we have had one or two industrial interests on the property. We also had a storage facility that was looking at it before, so.
Thank you.
I have a few questions. To follow up to Kelly's questions on density, this is 10 dwelling units per acre. When you look at the surrounding area, we saw 1-story, 2-story, 3-story. Can you give us just an approximation of the dwelling unit per acre ratio in the surrounding area? If you were to
Well, we
guess.
don't have that. We don't have that information specifically for you. It is multifamily development, and there is not necessarily a lot of open space associated on any of those lots. And so certainly we would be looking at more than 10 dwelling units per acre, perhaps more in the neighborhood of 20 to 30 dwelling units per acre for the various properties that surround it.
Mm-hmm. And also a follow-up to Pat's question. Do you have a hypothesis of why there has not been more activity on this property, especially given the, the 0% vacancy rate that we have now for, I think you shared that the vacancy rate is really low in South Park. You provided some stats on South Park. So there's no supply. So tell us a little bit more on, why you think this property has not been more active.
I think a big part of it is that the market is driving housing right now, and it's relatively easy to get financing for housing. It's probably more challenging to do other commercial developments, and the property would require a lot of infrastructure improvements, including undergrounding the utilities, which the previous interested parties who were industrial didn't feel like they could cover at the time.
Thank you. Anything else? Great. Yes.
For Denise, are there potential opportunities that are going to be lost if we let this property go from industrial, commercial to residential?
That is our contention, yes. One thing to cover, the applicant had referred to the market window, and we acknowledge that this site lacks the visibility that most retailers are going to want. However, industrial and office users don't need that market window, and that's been confirmed by commercial real estate experts in our area. Once it is rezoned, then it's going to stay rezoned. And I think if you consider the fiscal impact analysis done by Tischler Bice, they had indicated that if we take the current market conditions and we have heavy residential development, that it is going to be an annual net deficit through 2040. And the majority of developable land, if it's used for residential development, yields a negative revenue, generates less revenue but greater costs than non-residential development. And as we said, Littleton has a 0.1% vacancy rate for industrial properties. It has only 2 Class A offices. One is at 1501 Rust Mineral, it's the World Venture Building, and the other is at 2679 West Main. With so little available industrial and office space inventory, we can only rarely provide a proposal for the site inquiries that come down from the state. And industrial and office users include net new jobs, and they generally pay at a higher rate.
I want to commend your department on the economic analysis where you have spelled out many of the things that we stand to lose if we change this zoning from what it is to residential. It sounds like you're saying now that the city, and in the report, that the city does not come out ahead financially with a residential piece of property.
If this particular development is built, the revenues that come from the property taxes will exceed what the vacant land produces. But if we had a look at that, it's really only 4% of our general fund, so the property tax impacts are sort of negligible. It's the lost opportunity to have an office user or an industrial user that would create the jobs.
I have a couple more.
Go ahead.
I remember back in 2015 when there was a proposed development of a piece of property down in the southeast corner of Littleton. And the point then was we need to develop it with whatever we can get because it's been vacant for a while. But now that piece of property is being developed as a commercial building. So just waiting 4 years made it, preserved the opportunity. And it sounds like you're saying we have a similar situation here, perhaps.
Yes, and I think as the economy changes and money is more available for alternative uses, then other opportunities will arise.
So we don't need to rush into this.
Not in my opinion. And just to put it in perspective, CoStar, which is our resource, says that months to sale range from a low of 1.84 months to a high of 177 months from 2009 to 2019. So having something on the market for 53 months is not extraordinarily long.
I think that does it. Thank you very much.
Mr. Driscoll.
We're only talking about the 8 or so acres getting rezoned. We're not talking about the Nordgren property, the rest of the acreage. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So that potentially could, at some point, they might move. That could be still industrial. To Carol's point, or to your point, Denise, we still have a lot of people that would be, moving into that area, spending money in our city. So, and we have the impact fee. I think the impact fee per unit, correct me if I'm wrong, right about $4,500 or so. So I think that's a big plus. And the Marathon property that Carol was referencing is
No, I was not referencing that.
okay, excuse me. Well, I'm referencing the Marathon property. Much more desirable property, location-wise, views. This property sits behind retail, not visible by the street. So I just, I understand your comments about, not being on the market that long, but in my opinion, that's a long time it's been on the market. And just something I wanted to mention.
Well, and we acknowledge the fact that retail is not very workable on this property because it would be less than visible.
Great. Oh, go ahead.
So it's zone light industrial. Can you give us some examples of what kind of industries or companies might move into that area?
Well, I can provide for you some examples of uses that would be allowed on the property. And one thing to mention is that the property actually did receive approval from the city several years ago for self-storage. And so that is a use that could go in, should this rezoning potentially not go through, that would be a use that could move in here. But the uses would include office space, and it could also include retail and wholesales, laundry operations, laboratories, automobile sales and services, including used automobiles, manufacturing, government facilities, wireless communication facilities, and treatment and boarding of small animals.
Can you tell me why the public storage, why the investor pulled out of that opportunity?
We actually provided them with some information about competitors in the area, and I think they believed that we were at the saturation point. They also acknowledged that existing storage facilities weren't fully leased.
Karina, you see your hand up?
The property to the north, so the Nordgren, how many acres is that? And is there an opportunity for these two properties to combine at a later point, creating a larger campus and maybe greater opportunities for commercial, industrial, primary employment center?
I'm not entirely sure what the overall acreage of the Nordgren property is. And as for Nordgren expanding or leaving another another company or business moving in. Perhaps Denise can speak to that.
Our understanding is that Norgren had pondered the idea of expanding their own campus. That's why they held the property for quite a while and decided not to, but there's no indication that they're going to move that particular facility elsewhere.
If this property remained industrial, would there be a chance that it would provide jobs in Littleton?
If we got an industrial user or an office user, it certainly would.
All right, maybe, Council, if you don't have any immediate questions right now, if we hear from the applicant. Okay. Cool, and then after that, we'll have public comments. And if you will, please give us your name and all that good stuff.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jason Pock. That's P as in Papa, O-C-K, 4350 South Monaco Street, Denver, Colorado, 80237. I'm a land manager with Richmond American Homes, and I just want to start by thanking you all for your time here tonight. I know that at this late hour with the holidays upon us that everyone has other things that they might rather be doing. We certainly appreciate your time giving us an opportunity to present our application to all of you. I want to start by introducing Richmond for those of you who may not be familiar with us, and then I'm going to hand over the bulk of the presentation to my planning expert, Susan Wade with Redland. I'm certain, though, that I will interject often and sort of fight for the microphone to help answer questions that you all might have. Richmond American Homes is a very well-established, well-known home builder here in Colorado. We only build for-sale housing. We don't do apartments. We don't do commercial. We do one thing, and we try to improve upon it each and every time, and we're constantly learning and growing. One of the things that makes us unique is that we are one of the only home builders in sort of our profile that are headquartered here in Colorado. Our corporate office is in the Tech Center, and I mention that because I think it's important to understand that we are people from our superintendents and sales staffs all the way up to the executive suite. We're people who live and work right here in Littleton, in Metro Denver, across the Front Range. We're not some distant field office receiving orders from afar. We recognize that we are building homes, we're building neighborhoods that our friends and our family are going to live in, that areas that we're going to drive through every day. And I think it makes us better shepherds of the communities that we build. Another thing that makes us unique is that we are still founder-led after more than 4 decades. I see our founders in the office nearly every day. I interact with them constantly. And I mention this because for them, this is not a job or just a business. This is their livelihood. In my interaction with them, I believe this is their legacy. They're not just building a home, they're building their homes. These are things that they take great pride in. And as one small measure of that, we are the only home builder that I know of that puts a radon system in every home we build in Colorado, regardless of whether or not that home has a basement. And I mention that, albeit a small detail, I mention that because I think it speaks to the quality that these folks feel in the homes that they're trying to build. Now, I'll be the first to admit that we don't get every detail right all the time, but I have been in this business for close to a decade. I have worked with and for other home builders, and I have chosen Richmond. I am part of the Richmond team because I genuinely believe in what we're doing, and I genuinely believe that you will not find another group of people who care more about what we're doing. So with that, I'll turn the presentation over to Susan, and we'll answer your questions.
Thank you, Jason. My name is Susan Wade. I'm with Redland. My address is 1500 West Canal Court here in Littleton, Colorado. So I will really try hard not to repeat anything Andrea said. I appreciate everyone's time. As Andrea said, the location of the site, we won't go through that again. One of the key things about the site is the walkability. There's a dentist office across the street. There is an office building, and I think it's called Wild Ginger Thai Restaurant. There is a wig shop, a King Soopers, Starbucks, Chipotle, 2 banks, Great Western and Wells Fargo, and it has a very walkable community. There is transit orientation on Littleton Boulevard and Broadway. As Andrea said, we are in the GPDP process. Future steps would be SDP and then construction documents. We started this process back in February of 2018 with initial meetings with the city staff. We then held a neighborhood meeting on December 14th, 2018. We chose to go through the P4 process, which is preliminary project process. I was going to have it for the new council members, and I'm sorry. We went through Planning Commission and City Council, hearing initial comments. It was really important to us that we took that initial step to gain a more clearer vision on what the city was really hoping for. We then are now in the GPDP process. One of the other stakeholder attachments that was added to the pile that Wendy just added was a petition of people that live and work in the area. We have 26 signatures of business owners and employees that support this project. As Andrea mentioned, the 2014 code is what we have been following. The site is currently zoned industrial. We believe we hit 4 of the main goals. One with the dynamic Littleton, where we are responding to a changing demand. This is a changing demand in housing, smaller lot, smaller costs, more attainable. We are also providing an outdoor Littleton, improving walk and corridors within this property. We'll show you later the existing conditions of some of the walking corridors. We also believe that we are providing a more walkable community, as I mentioned earlier, and obviously a distinctive Littleton with the quality of architecture, as Jason just mentioned. Envision Littleton, I know this is not following and being placed within the vision of Littleton, but it really does relate to this rezone request. The property is currently zoned, I'm going to go forward here just for a minute, is currently under the character map as corridor mixed use, as you can see here in the light purple. Oops, back, there we go. Corridor mixed use is identified as a high-profile roadway corridor. This can include retail, office uses, services, as well as residential. The planned character is a soften the auto-oriented development and enhance walkability and safety. This really does relate to the rezone use. The neighboring character use is the residential mixed district, which is interesting because the actual image used for the product is actually a photo just west of this property, including just a small corner. So we really do connect with this residential mixed district as well, as you can see here on the map. Our design criteria really focuses on diversity of housing. This will provide a unique for-sale urban housing product that is not found in the current neighborhood at a price point below traditional single-family detached units. It's a reinvestment in the neighborhood, strong investment into an area that has remained stagnant for decades. We believe the improved street scene will help the entire neighborhood, and this will bring new energy and home ownership to the neighborhood. We believe a healthy lifestyle will be provided with the 4.5 acres of open space, pocket park, and public access. The entire 50% open space will be maintained by the Homeowners Association. The improved street scene will occur with undergrounding of the existing power lines, removing of the chain and barbed wire security fence, and providing detached walks and tree lawns. The infrastructure will also be improved. All the walks will be ADA standards for public walks, and will also improve the stormwater outfall to the Nordgren property. This is the current site as it stands today. It is an empty field with a paved parking lot that has been aging and surrounded with the security barbed wire fence. The proposed neighborhood plan that we have in front of you tonight will provide architecture that greets the street. It'll place a pocket park at the key intersection of Delaware and Powers, open to the public. It will pull pedestrian corridors through the site. The neighborhood form creates small clusters of 3 and 4 cluster units, really creating more of an intimate neighborhood. This was a change from the initial P4 plan that I'll discuss later. This will be a fully maintained landscape area, both common and on lot. The internal streets and alleys will be private. The open space, as this is a PDR, will require 50% open space. We have over 40% of our open space will be within the common area, the light green, and the additional 10% will be on lot. The detached homes, some people may ask, why are we not attaching the homes at this density? Usually townhome densities are between 10 and 15 DUs per acre. The single-family detached actually is the unique housing product that we believe sort of hits that different market. They're tired of living in a townhome or an apartment. They don't want the noise any longer of their neighbors on the wall or the kids and the dogs. They want independent, individual homes. We believe the detached small lot provides for air movement. It provides for light inside the unit internally where attached product doesn't. It's a completely different buyer profile. So the P4 process was a really educational element for us, and what you'll see on the left is the P4 plan, and what you'll see on the left is the current concept. So with the P4 process, we came in with a concept that had 99 units, which was about 11.2 DUs per acre. We heard during the P4 process, too dense. Currently, the plan in front of you has 85 units at 10 DUs per acre. We've reduced the neighborhood by 14 units. The lot size at the time was 26 by 50. We heard the lots are small. The intention is for small lots for this product. They don't want to maintain their own lot property. We increased the lot width by 4 feet. We're at 30 by 50 if you include the water easement, utility easement in the rear. So we listened and we heard and we increased the lot size. We've always had the 50% open space. That's a requirement. The park location. Initially, the park location was internal. One of the comments was it's not very accessible to the public. They wouldn't call that a public park. We've placed it, pulled it out on the edge and made it very public at the main intersection. The perimeter street scene, the initial comment was there are long block lengths on Delaware and Powers. So what we have done is we have rearranged the unit count, have side elevations, smaller clusters, breaks with green courts, as well as pedestrian corridors that pull down and through the site. So we made major changes from the P4 process and all of the comments that we heard during the stakeholders process. The existing buildings, as was mentioned earlier, that surround the property are 3-story and 3.5-story. The one on the far left is the one at the corner at Bannock and Powers, thank you, which is about a 30-foot story. The middle building is the architecture just to the east on Bannock, 3.5 stories, plus steps going up. So we believe the overall height for that building is about 36 feet. The 3-story corner on the far right is at the corner of Delaware and Powers, and that is actually a 3.5-story building. The roof element is enclosed. Architecturally, we believe that this matches and aligns with the height of the surrounding neighborhoods. We believe that this will provide an urban aesthetic. It will provide a combination of materials, unlike some of the other existing elevations. The front elevation will be, each will provide 20% on masonry, and at least 40% of the units will have brick to relate to the urban character of Littleton. One of the comments that was also received was that within Littleton Village elevation, they wanted something that looked unique to Littleton and closer to downtown. Obviously, front facades that greet the street with front doors and stoops, low-maintenance, single-family, outdoor spaces for patios, balconies, and optional rooftop decks. And we are encouraging and providing side elevations that are enhanced both on public right-of-way and any of the internal alleys. Internally, I think that the interiors are very clean and contemporary. They attract both first-time buyers, young families, and active adults. I believe some of the letters of support have provided that in many letters. Jason wants to add something.
Thank you. I want to add here that a colleague of mine, Ryan, helped me to take a good look at resale inventory in the surrounding area. We pulled the resale homes closings of record for the past 12 months, and we really kind of dug into what those homes look like and what they offer, and we can talk about what those numbers.
Jason,
Yep.
can we take a 5-minute break?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Sorry. And thank you for the impromptu break. All right. If you could kind of just back up 10 seconds.
You got it. So if we're ready to begin again, we had paused on the slide here showing some images of the interior of this collection of homes, and I just wanted to point out a few details about kind of the lifestyle, the buyer profile maybe for these types of homes, and share a little bit about what we've learned in the area here. So these homes are generally 1,750 to 1,900 square feet. There's no basement. There's sort of a tuck-under two-car garage, maybe a small laundry room or small office on the first floor. The main living area is on the second level with your kitchen, your living room, generally 2 and 3 bedrooms, and available rooftop terrace on a few of the house plans. In my experience, these have been appealing to a variety of users. They were sort of created for kind of urban infill locations with the sensibilities, the urban sensibilities of kind of a low-maintenance, lock-and-leave kind of a townhome, but also recognizing that a lot of buyers want something that's fully detached, something where they don't rely on a homeowners association to maintain the exterior, where they don't have to hear their neighbor through a shared wall and so forth. The buyers that I've seen personally, I've seen some young professionals. I've seen some active empty nesters who maybe have just sent a kid off to college, and now they want sort of a smaller, low-maintenance home so that they can travel and do more. I've seen some single parents that have maybe gone through a change in their life where all of a sudden, they have their own household and they're supporting a child or a couple children on their own. So there's just a variety of people that these have appealed to. I will also say that when we looked at home closings of record in the past year, within a mile radius of this site, we found about 240 homes that had resold, and the average age of those homes built in 1958. So we're talking about homes that are generally 60 years old. And there's nothing wrong with a home that's 60 years old. There's obviously a lot of different character that you get in a home like that. But I mention that because one of the goals here is to provide a different type of housing. And I think that there are certainly people that we know in our lives that are looking for sale housing that are maybe not finding it in that existing stock of 60-year-old homes. When you have a 60-year-old home, that means maybe dated utilities, maybe it means aluminum wiring, maybe it means asbestos in tile. There's a lot of things that it could mean. And for some buyers, maybe they would prefer simply to have their new fresh finishes, the ones that they've selected themselves from a home gallery, an open concept floor plan, and so forth. So those are all the things that I wanted to share on the architecture, and I'll turn it back over to Susan to continue.
So this illustrates, the images here really illustrate the existing condition today on the site. It is an aging paved parking lot. It is a narrow sidewalk with unkept landscape condition. We really believe that the benefit of this rezone is to provide the strong investment into an area that has probably been stagnant for decades. The neighborhood will provide unique housing, as we mentioned before, not found in the area, at a price point below most single-family detached homes. We also believe that the consideration of this rezone should look at the good access and proximity to the site, especially to commercial and retail amenities, as mentioned earlier. But the property lacks that marketing window, as mentioned by staff, from Broadway, that so many businesses desire. Potential commercial industrial users have passed on this property, as previously mentioned. We believe that this lack of commercial industrial interest in the property, particularly during this economic growth cycle, really does speak volumes about the appropriate use for this property at times. While the property remains vacant, there are potential homeowners that are sidelined from purchasing apartments, from potentially become new consumers to the existing businesses. So So far, we've really talked at a high level about the site plan, and now we really want to kind of dive into what does the site really look like. So these are a few additional site photos from Andrea's selection that illustrates Bannock. So currently, the site is on the left side of the larger photo, and the view arrow is in the lower key map, so you can tell where the view photo was taken from. This illustrates somewhat of a harsh edge to the street corridor, narrow attached walks, poor landscape condition, security fence, overhead power lines. With this property, we will underground the power lines. I think one pole has to stay on this side, the one that swings over to the apartment building, but the remaining power lines will all be underground. We are going to remove the barbed wire fence, and we are going to provide a new detached walk with tree lawns.
Before you move on from that one, I also want to, given what we've heard tonight from the young ladies that are no longer in the audience here, this photo was taken several days after the snowfall, and you'll see that there is snow and ice collected on that walk. With our proposal, the walks around the perimeter of the community, the streets interior to the community, the alleys, all of that will be maintained by a homeowners association. So in the spirit of creating that more walkable, that safer neighborhood for pedestrians, I think this snow here is one simple example of that.
Thank you, Jason. Along Powers Avenue, you'll see the 3-story elements, including a stair tower, as we discussed, shallow front setback, surface parking instead of garages. As you can see on that lower half of the key map, these apartment buildings are separated with large areas of impervious material, very minimal landscape component. So again, we'll be undergrounding the power line, detaching the walk, adding street trees.
Can I jump in again? Mm-hmm. I really like this image here showing the surface parking. There's nothing wrong with that. Everybody needs to have a place for their vehicle. But I want to sort of call your attention, if I can find the slide real quick here, to what was shown in the plan. Was it the 2019 plan about softening the auto-oriented development? I think this surface parking lot and all of the other surface parking lots kind of between those 70s apartment buildings speak to that sort of auto environment. Our parking is going to be largely contained in a 2-car garage under each of the homes. Only the guest parking is going to be exterior. And I think that is a real enhancement to the neighborhood.
Along Delaware, this is probably our most enhanced current elevation, mostly because there's no power lines. We'll again be here removing the fence line, removing the deteriorating retaining wall of the railroad ties. As Jason was mentioning, this is a photo taken south of the property through that impervious pavement with our site in the background. You can see the power lines kind of swinging back and forth. So architecturally, this is a 2.5 to a 3-story mass with minimal landscape and impervious paving with maybe a drainage issue. I went back to the site, revisited it again this past weekend. I was hoping to get additional photos that had less snow in the site, in the photos. But what I found that was interesting is that when I retook this photo, the mattresses were still there and there were 2 additional couches. So we are not judging. I think this is a wonderful place to live. I think it's a fine place to live. We just we mention this only because we want to do better. And I think that I always believe in the saying, the rising tide lifts all ships. And I think that we are hoping to be that tide in the neighborhood, not to change the existing condition, but just to add to the existing condition.
That's right. The spirit of this photo tour is to show you what the neighborhood looks like today, to give you a feel for the buildings that we are finding that compatibility with, to the heights and the number of stories of living. I want to just expand on what Susan is saying about these dumpsters here. Again, in the spirit of seeing the conditions and recognizing small ways that we think we can do even better. Our plan for our community is no community dumpsters. It's individual trash toters that are required by covenants to be stored within the garage, except for the day of pickup.
One other member of our team, John Covert with Metro Study, has provided, for example, projects that actually have allowed that rising tide within the community. Midtown at Adams County, Observatory Heights in Denver, Ironworks in Inglewood, and Lowry Boulevard 1 in Denver. We believe that redevelopment often raises home values, income levels, and even test scores in surrounding neighborhoods. It supports businesses by attracting higher income residents with improved shopping power. We believe that it provides housing diversity. As mentioned, there is very little for sale product in this neighborhood. We want to offer home ownership. With home ownership, it becomes an investment, and there's a greater need for maintenance and for safety. The parks are encouraged for walkability, outdoor play, and recreation, also for the public. So.
All right, why don't I tackle this one here?
Great.
So I think that this slide right here might be particularly important to Council Member Fay, maybe also to the Economic Development Department. What we wanted to do here was just be very direct, be upfront with all of you, and really talk about who bears the cost of this development. I think in our current climate, it's easy to sometimes be cynical that a developer must be getting some sort of free ride. And we've included this slide to talk about who's paying for the initial upfront costs and who's paying for those ongoing future costs, so that we can really challenge that premise that residential is a money-losing venture for a city such as Littleton. So let's talk about the upfront costs here. I'll be very clear, I'll be very direct with each and every one of you. There are no subsidies here. We are not asking for any incentives. We are not asking for any special tax consequences here. There's no ask from the city of Littleton. All of the development that's required in order for the first homes to start going vertical here, those are all construction costs that will be done by Richmond. And we've summarized some of them for you there so that you can understand what those costs are, and they are significant just in order to pull our first building permit. Councilmember Elrod, I believe you mentioned earlier something about the storage complex and why they didn't move forward or why other users haven't. I think that this right here, this cost estimate based on our preliminary figures is a good indicator. This number is not inclusive of the price of the land. So what we're talking about here is how do we make development of this site viable? Purchasing the land, entitling the land with our engineering and consulting fees, doing the earthwork, providing the utilities, providing those improvements such as undergrounding the utilities, separating those walks, doing all the things that we need to do just in order to build our new structures. Big upfront costs. I'll also point out, by the way, this is based on our preliminary engineering. There's a lot more work that has to be done, and these numbers are subject to change, but I want to give you a frame of reference for us to start. So now we're talking about the future maintenance. So one of the ideas that we have in our head is that a developer builds something and then the city is left to pay for it. And that's not at all the case, certainly not here. And I'm going to try to backtrack real quick to find a simple site plan for us to take a look at our current context. Here we go. This is a good one. We'll jump from here to here. So when you're looking at the site as it exists today, we know that one of the biggest costs in ongoing maintenance for a residential community is maintaining those public works items, those public streets. The public streets in this area are all existing. Delaware, Powers, Bannock, those streets all exist today. All of the streets that Richmond will construct, those internal streets, those internal alleys, those internal parking stalls, those internal sidewalks, all of those will be maintained by our homeowners association. There is no increased burden for street maintenance based on our proposal here. That homeowners association, by the way, is also going to be responsible for all of that landscape maintenance. So those new tree lawns that we'll create with those detached walks, with those street trees, with the private pocket park, I say private because it's all privately maintained. The City of Littleton, the Parks Department, will not be paying to irrigate these areas. They will not be paying to trim these trees or mow these lawns. All of that will be borne by the homeowners association. The cost to the City of Littleton, well, let's talk about what those are. The public streets which are already existing, right? The sanitary sewer system, but these are going to be users as everyone else would be, and so they'll be paying fees into the system. Not the water system, because that's through Denver Water, through a separate fee structure. Not the gas and electric, because that's through Excel, again, through a separate fee structure. And then there are other intangible items, police service, library, and so forth. So the future costs to the City of Littleton, they're much smaller than the traditional suburban new home community that you might otherwise be thinking about. Since I'm up here, I'll just continue talking. Early on, Councilmember Driscoll, somebody had mentioned impact fees. Let's put them right front and center here. Roughly $4,500 per home times 85 homes will be bringing approximately $400,000 worth of impact fees to the City of Littleton at time of building permit based on the current fee structure here. I like to mention this because, again, we're not asking for anything. We're not asking for any sort of free ride. These are the impact fees that the City of Littleton has established, and we will be paying them, and we will be paying, you know, our impact fees as any developer were. And, you know, if you look at these numbers in context here, that's nearly $50,000 to the library. What could the library do with that $50,000? Maybe I'll just finish this out. So I'll kind of lead into this slide with a little bit of a personal note. When I got into the home building industry, my first boss, my mentor in many ways, though maybe I didn't appreciate her as much as I should have, her name was Linda, and she taught me a lot. And she taught me that what we do, the work that we're engaged in every day, it's an iterative process. It's we become good at it by doing it and assessing it, seeing what worked and what didn't, and making improvements on it and doing it again. And I told you up front when I introduced myself at the beginning of this presentation that we don't get every detail right all the time. There are millions of details that go into building homes. Homes are not built in a dust-free factory. They're built in a field and in all weather conditions. And by constantly revising our work, by looking at the things that have gone well and things that we should have changed or should have sort of foreseen, you know, that's how we improve the product that we ultimately deliver. So in this sense, we've got a quick list of some lessons learned, and we can talk about any of these if you'd like to, but we're bringing significant open space, more than we had in Littleton Village. We're bringing wider lots, and those wider lots, as Susan mentioned, create the opportunity for more of those sort of air and light corridors, but they also give us flexibility to deliver more precisely on our construction. We have increased and better guest parking, and we have that guest parking thoughtfully located in proximity to homes in all corners of this community. We have thought very thoroughly about a homeowners association and what maintenance responsibilities are involved. Ultimately, we'll put together a build-out budget so that homeowners, before they even assign a contract to their home, can understand what those costs will be on a monthly basis. We've refined our house product. We've built the house product here and in other municipalities, in other building codes, and each time we do, we learn lessons. And of course, we benefited from the early input, the P4 process, with your board and with the Planning Commission. Good.
So really, just as a wrap up, you know, where do we go from here? You know, hopefully tonight with the approval of the GPDP, we'll be rolling into the site development plan in June or July of 2020. 9 months of horizontal improvements, hoping for building permits, March to April of 2021, just as an overall schedule. Before we say thank you, I just want to have one clarification on the zoning question. The site is actually zoned IP Industrial Park, which also allows manufacturing and distribution and fabrication. So I just want to make sure that's a little more intense than just light industrial. And it also has a no limit height. So we just really appreciate your time, and we're here to answer any questions. Thank you for your attention.
Council, if we could, I'd like to get into the public comments if we could.
Good.
All right, our first up, it will be Donovan Odell. Donovan. On deck will be Carol Brezak. And name and address, please.
I'm sorry I got out of the house without my hearing aids. I want to start by congratulating all the members of council. As citizens, when we get a new council, we're looking forward to them making this continually a better community as time goes on.
Donovan, could you give your name and address, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's Donovan Odell, 2494 West Costia Avenue. I am blessed to live in District 4. I say blessed because I feel relatively safe in my neighborhood. My next door neighbor is a detective on the Littleton Police Force. There's many police officers that live in the area, and criminals know this, so we do not have as serious a crime rate as other places in Littleton do. I've been very committed to the community and being instrumental in helping establish Littleton Public Charter School, serving as advisory committee to Littleton Public Schools, to sitting on the licensing authority here in Littleton, the governor appointing me at a state level to be on a state committee in behalf of the disabled. I love, as I know you all do, by your time and commitment, this community. I've lived here for over 50 years, and what I have seen is Littleton become less of what we moved in here for. And what I want to speak to in regards to this project is safety. In Littleton, FBI says at one time it was one of the safest communities to live in Colorado. This is no longer the case, according to the FBI. In Littleton, you have a 1 in 32 chance of being the victim of physical violence or theft. What I heard here about this project was kind of deja vu. Because of all the apartments adjacent that, I heard the same arguments decades ago. But as time goes on, you get problems that I know every member of the council is aware. Density is directly related to crime. I have grandchildren and a daughter and a son-in-law that live across from that property. I worry about my grandchildren walking to school.
Time's up.
All right.
Your time has expired.
It's expired? Okay. I just want to strongly urge you to vote no on this for the safety of the citizens in this area.
Thank you, Donovan. Appreciate it. Brezak. Don Burns, you are on deck.
I'm Carol Brezak. I live in District 4, but I'm a small business owner, and my office is not very far from this project. In fact, I drive Powers probably 5 times a week. And right now, the number of cars that are parked on the north and south side of Powers, right where there's going to be the entry into this thing. I can just see it's begging for an accident. I have to go slower than what the speed limit actually calls for now because of the ice and all of the cars that are parked, and our cars are big and it's hard when you have oncoming traffic. So I'm concerned. I'm one of those people that try to avoid where the traffic is. I have my little pathways through neighborhoods. I grew up in Littleton. I'm tired of the traffic. I'm going to have to find another way to get where I need to go because it's bad now. It's going to be worse with this. To Councilman Fay's point, I remember when we had Walmart who wanted to come to Littleton, and we waited. We said no. Actually, the voters, council said yes, but the voters said no. And we waited, and what a blessing that wait was. So let's be patient and do the right thing. What I really would like to tell you, I went through my files tonight and looked at campaign literature. And I think one of the elements that we're missing from the conversation is the quality of life. Those of us that have lived here forever, we came here for particular reasons. And we're seeing those, as Donovan stated, we're seeing the elements that that brought us here and that keep us here floating away. And this is just another one of those levels of degradation of our community that I'm very sad what's happened to Littleton. So when I look at what the campaign promises or rhetoric was, you have the opportunity to say no to this and fulfill your obligation or your campaign promises to people. And it all got down to the quality of life, whether it was called economic sustainability or community character or small town feel or less density. Those are all elements of quality of life. I know you will hear from some people tonight that will give you good reason why you can say no to this. You're not going to get it from the developer. And we didn't get it really from ourselves. We heard a little bit about the economic sustainability. But as I said earlier tonight, your job is to be up there representing us. And us don't get much in the way of time to really sit down and go into good arguments why you might want to say no to this. Thank you.
Thank you. Don Burns. And then we have Camila Ruff is on deck, and Janine Phillips, you're in the hole.
Good evening, new council. Don Bruns, District 4. For several reasons, council members Elrod and Mellon's introduction of Ordinance 29 is disappointing, yet not surprising because we've seen Karina push for higher density growth before. And as an outspoken advocate for Scott, it's easy to see why you two teamed up, so I understand that. To bring this before council. Yet, if I heard this correctly, even representatives of Littleton's business community previously spoke out against the changed land use this ordinance would authorize. Apparently that wasn't convincing, at least not yet. Another reason is that the proposal would stack too many narrow multi-story structures too close together. The scale and spacing appears dehumanizing. If you took Psych 101, you know that we learned way back then what happens when too many lab animals are housed in too little space. They start chewing on one another, and so do humans. Such occurrences here in Littleton are now being reported almost daily on Nextdoor. And if the city continues to push this kind of development forward, more crime is only a matter of time. Besides the social impacts, there's on-site adverse effects that could easily be expected. For example, those narrow V-shaped drives will readily fill with cold season ice because tall buildings will block out radiant sun rays. We see examples of that in much wider streets already, and winter hasn't even begun. These will be places looking for accidents and personal injuries to happen. And then there's the additional matter of traffic congestion. Or is this location too far away from your own backyards to matter? Simply another NIMBY project not in my backyard. So then why would anyone want to advance this proposal? Ah, yes, it's money, of course. What was I thinking? But really, where is it going? As with most outside development schemes, much of the money turning up ends up following developers right out of the city. This is not my opinion. It's well established in the literature. And as usual, even if it doesn't involve street maintenance, citizens will be expected to pay for the additional associated infrastructure and service costs incurred if council says yes. It's not gone unnoticed that at least some new council members campaigned to protect community character. And of that of course includes protecting citizens from the negative end results of higher density character change. Have any of these yet been addressed? Mayor Valdez, congratulations to you and to those council members who voted to select you as our new mayor. That means there's hope under your leadership. Council will turn over a new leaf by addressing these issues such as this before it acts. Wouldn't that be refreshing?
I hate cutting you off at that point. It was sounding so good at the end. I like that part. But your time has expired.
It was going to be so good.
I was done anyhow. Thank you, Jerry.
I'm starting to get into it. All right. Okay, that was Don. Camilla Ruff. Hello. Pam. Chad is up next. Sorry.
My name is Camille Ruff. I live at 5560 South Elati, apartment 210 in Littleton, which is about a block west of this project. I was here on December 9 speaking, addressing the issue about the floodplain regulation modification to put in an apartment building across the street from my building. I live at the Laurel Lee Apartments. It's heartening to know that it's going to be low-income housing, which this will not be. I'm still concerned about the issue of gentrification because these developments start more developments that eventually end up driving people like me out of neighborhoods. This neighborhood is a nice neighborhood, but it's a low-income neighborhood, and if everybody starts building, then eventually I'm going to be driven out. Another issue I have with this is basically pushing out. The city of Littleton originally zoned this property industrial for a reason, and I've heard about a buffer zone and zoning that was really put into place to provide a buffer between business and residential and, for instance, Broadway, which is 5 blocks to the east of us. I have concerns about with these particular houses, and you know, keep in mind this is out of my price range. I will never live in one of these because I can't afford it, and especially if they have HOA fees in addition. But the problem is when you drive industry out of your area and it gets pushed into industrial parks and stuff, it makes it harder for people who would have those kind of jobs to get to them. They have to drive farther, they have to take public transportation. So all of this changes the neighborhood, maybe in ways that aren't quite as good as they could be. Another concern after looking at architect renderings of these projects is they're 4 stories high. What happens if there's a fire? How are people going to get down to the bottom? For all these reasons, I'm opposed to this, and I hope that you as council people who were elected to represent the people in your district will do that and not cater to developers who can go somewhere else and build their things there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Pam Chadbourne. Janine Phillips, you are now on deck. Sorry.
Oh. Actually, just quickly, The city has no urgency to rezone this property, and I'm really glad Economic Development pointed that out. And there is more time to wait for the different market, and that's exactly what zoning is supposed to do. It is the long-term plan. The city should not respond to immediate market forces and give away everything now. In fact, council, you got to leave something for the next councils. So please, this really isn't your play right now. There's time. Our budget is fine. We don't need this. We can afford to let it sit. And for businesses that might move here, Tesla. So Tesla is right over there. What if they wanted an office here? They also do batteries, and they also do roof tiles that are solar panels. What if they want to promote that business here? This would be a great site for that. This proposal is a fine product for a different site, and the benefits that they mentioned would all come with any other development. So that's not a good reason to use this. So I'm going to ask you to deny the rezoning and deny the GPDP. The city needs the job opportunities and our taxes from this 9 acres much more than residential. And in Littleton, I already sent you the table, 113 acres have been already converted from job-related zoning and land uses to residential. We can't afford much more. I don't think we can afford to convert this. And deny the GPDP too. These are 85 four-story stack homes. You got my email, it violates all 6 criteria. And in the zoning code, and it violates numerous goals and policies in the citywide plan and in the Progress Park neighborhood. And in the future, maybe they should be separated, I don't know, but rezoning and housing are 2 different things. This housing is limited use. It's not suitable for young families with infants or their parents or grandparents who babysit for them, or seniors or people with disabilities, or people with, somebody pointed out to me, dogs or cats that have problems, or people who have better things to do with their time than running up and downstairs. There are hundreds of this 4-story stack design that have already been approved by the bodies here at Littleton Village, at County Line Road, at Bellevue and Prince, at downtown Littleton, and there's probably more. And several of these were converted by our city from Marathon, from retail to residential. Again, losses of that opportunity. We can't afford to lose more, and this is the table that I sent proving the 113 acres that I know about. I gave a lot of details about the violations of GPDPs. I've got 3 of them. This is not a creative layout. There's 85 of the same form, et cetera, et cetera. And it's not consistent with the 2014 comprehensive plan. So I'm going to ask you, please, deny this rezoning. We need this land for industrial use. Thanks.
Thank you very much. All right, Janine Phillips.
Mayor, there's a first page to that, too.
I'd like to start with the second page. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. My name is Janine Phillips. I live at 5435 South Delaware Street, the Crestline Park townhomes that are directly across the street from the Norgren property. I have been asked to kind of speak on behalf of the majority of our complex who were not brave enough to come out when it was cold. I also am a 25-year resident in that location since 1993. I've lived in Littleton for 43 years of my life, gone through all the public schools. So I've watched Littleton since infancy, and this is my home. And we now have the 3rd generation of my family living here in Littleton. My primary concern is that I have 2 daughters, and one of which goes to Littleton High School, and that is exactly her pathway, her footpaths on her way to school. And to have to compete, even if they have the interior of the vehicles all underground, by my calculations, by what's been presented, 221 more vehicles for her potentially to dodge on her way to and from school as they come back and forth. As it is extremely difficult to get down that Powers corridor with the already existing apartments and the congestion that we have going on, and we have to take turns squeaking down that. That's not going to, the infrastructure is not there to accommodate this many. Also, as I heard before, I have concerns. They're not forever homes. My husband is a stroke survivor, fortunately not without paralysis, but my neighbor no longer can live in her home because it is full of stairs. If we are going to be making new community homes, they do need to be accessible so that they can be forever homes and that you don't lose your home because suddenly you have a physical disability or have those kinds of difficulties. I'm also concerned about the crime. Number of instances, and I've seen it increase more and more with vehicular damage. We had a tire stolen off of a car in our complex. I can't imagine more vehicles and more density and more people being in that area improving that circumstance, even if they are high-dollar residences that are available there. I think that we're moving quick or contemplating moving quick. Hopefully you're not moving too quick. And that the developer will come through, they will develop, they will make the properties, they will move on, and we will lose an area where we could have created jobs. Norgren and its massive number of jobs that it originally offered in its heyday is why we have the great population in that neighborhood, and it has dwindled down and dwindled down. Let's not lose that opportunity in the future to develop jobs that are available right there and available. So I thank you all for your time. I really urge you to be patient, be considerate of the other homeowners that are in the area that don't want more traffic to Dodge. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now for the first pagers, Janine Erickson and Phil Ceranic, you're on deck. And Janine, I apologize for not starting with page one. I know you hustled down here to get that spot.
Good evening, Council. Jeannie Erickson, I live in District 1. Littleton needs a good mix of residential, commercial, business, and industrial to keep our city the wonderful place it is, and to keep a wonderful place to live in for the future of our children and grandchildren and the next generations to come. We have very little vacant land left in Littleton, and what we decide to do with it is very important. Its effects will remain and last for many generations. Commercial business, retail, and industrial zone land is very important to the city's coffers. We need the taxes from this type of zone property to run our city. In the past few years, we have bowed down to residential developers by rezoning much of our very valuable commercially zoned property for housing. And once this is done, it's gone for a lifetime. We have, as Pam showed you earlier, rezoned from commercial business and industrial many, many parcels in the last few years in Littleton. We have done our share in giving people places to live, but we also need to keep our city going. I am concerned that losing all this land that brings income into the city of Littleton is going to cause major stress on the city's budget. We need this land for commercial, business, offices, and industrial to keep our city afloat. Please consider this when making your decision tonight on a very important matter. Keep this commercial property zone commercial. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Phil Cernanek and Pete McClintock, you're on deck.
Thank you, Council. Phil Cernanek, District 3. Rezoning to residential is forever. When we take a look at impact fees that Jason so graciously was offering to the city, those are actually documented real costs that exist with residents. It's not associated with streets or other items. So be aware of that. Norgren retained the block campus until 2011. So when some of the applicants' documentations talk about this being vacant or dormant for decades, that's not true. When we look at costs of residents, they are beyond those impact fees because there's a lot of items that are not specifically documented that are costs that are related sometimes to development, inspections, etc. The cost of infrastructure that Jason so nicely pointed out of over $6 million, MDC, the parent company to Richmond American Homes, is a publicly traded firm. They're not in the business of being a nonprofit and giving money away. That's more than $70,000 per unit that's going to move into the cost of that. As been mentioned by others, there's no provisions for affordable housing or senior accessible or disabled accessible housing that's been included. And the housing is not unique to Littleton. And the housing that does exist, similar to what has been rendered, is now more than 20% short-term rental. And the city has yet to deal with what that means in our character to our communities, and that number is growing every day. Percentage is growing. The gap analysis that was performed primarily looked at the alternative of retail. And I agree, you don't have those marketing corridors that can exist here, but there are industrial uses that could be appropriate for this property. The Littleton Englewood Wastewater Treatment Plant serves a circuit manufacturer that's in South Jefferson County. They're within a residential mixed-use area, and this would be very appropriate for them. So as we go through the criteria, one, this is not creative or a destination. It's not an innovation or more efficient than housing that is otherwise available in Littleton. It reduces and is mentioned as one of those items that exacerbates an inadequate industrial supply of opportunities.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Peter McClintock, are you still here? And I apologize for not getting to you earlier, Peter. Peter Lynch. And Linda Knuffy, you will be up, and then followed by Paul Bingham, who's in the hole.
Thank you, Council. Thank you, Mayor. Peter Lynch, actually representing Norgren at 5400 South Delaware. Just a few points of question. A lot of history with Norgren. I appreciate you recognizing that. A company that's been developed, Carl Norgren developed a property, I think about 60 years ago, and we've been occupying that space since. We have no desire to move, no expectation to move. We actually expect to bring more jobs into Norgren as we look to expand our operations. Our headquarters for the Americas is at this location. We represent about 2,000 employees across, mostly in the U.S., South America and Mexico. A couple of points for Norgren for our behalf is the issue of security. Right now, we do have a pretty good barrier that is at a chain link fence as discussed. If we're talking about 4-story, 3.5-story properties with a 5-foot fence, how do we protect our employees? How do we stay safe, secure? How do we protect our intellectual property, et cetera? So these buildings will be right adjacent to our parking lot. So a concern there. Ultimately, that's the most concern with me. I think Jason and Susan did a fabulous job on selling the pitch. I think the residents have done a marvelous job explaining their concerns. I don't want to argue one way or the other. I just want to make sure if this does go through, that the city considers our property, our security, our safety. We do have a pond. I would be very disappointed if people hop a 5-foot fence, get too close to the pond, et cetera. So a lot of concerns around safety, privacy, security, the buffers, the 5-foot fence. And I think that's the main point for us. We're not intending to leave. We are actually expanding. We're growing. We've acquired a major business in 2018 that allows us to consolidate further and bring more jobs to Littleton, and we'd like to continue that. But I'd also like the city to understand our concerns and the security of our employees. We have 250 employees, I think, now in our facility. We'll grow from there. So that's all I have. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. And any questions anybody has for Norgren?
Peter, can you tell us how many acres you will still have after this?
Yeah, I think we're around 23 acres, but I'm not sure. We donated the property to the north, to the school.
And you said you're looking to expand. You're looking to expand in Littleton or some around
Well,
the
expand
country?
as in filling the factory
Gotcha,
further.
gotcha. Thanks.
We do have opportunity to grow our employment without growing our facility. We did have, I think in our heyday, around 600 employees in the facility. We're about 250 now. And as we look to consolidate, as mentioned, we're looking to grow our business. We're actually bringing some products now, as we speak, this year and into early next year into the Littleton factory to add more jobs, to bring that consolidated manufacturing point. So more work
Thank
to
you
be done
very
there.
much.
So
Appreciate
thank
it.
you, appreciate it.
All right. Linda Knufe. Paul Bingham, you're up next.
The other day, I was playing soccer with a guest, a very respectful guest dog, and in my family room, and I realized I won't be able to do that anymore because it's just too loud. And also, if I had little kids, it would be kind of crazy to have them in this environment because it just wouldn't be conducive to having loud people, loud kids within 6 feet of each other. Just wouldn't be feasible. I wonder why this is not working. Well, anyways, if you look on page, I believe, it's on your staff reports there. Here we go. If you look on your staff reports, one of the pages here, you'll see what Carol Brezak was talking about. It's development to the south of the neighborhood, and let me get this going here. So if you can see, this road is really narrow and it's really tough to drive down, and I wound up sometimes driving with my eyes closed like this. It's pretty bad. So compared that to what you want to add there, and if you imagine the right-hand side of the screen just showing all these tall buildings compared to some of these other documents. Also, 10-2-23, which Pam was starting to talk about and Phil too, this is specifically called out in the ordinance that you'll be passing tonight. And as City Council finds a rezoning conforms to development standards of the plan development criteria of sections B and D. I'm only going to go through B. And there's one that I can't make the determination here tonight. But anyways, this is pretty serious that it's not more creative, it's not innovative, it's not including a variety and mix of uses. So this does not meet the comprehensive plan. And here's a card I got in the mail for this past election. It says your concerns and your loves, and part of it is growth, density, apartments, change, traffic, and develop. And your loves is neighborhoods, open space, museum, historic downtown, small town feel. Small town feel is really critical here. If you approve this tonight, you're really saying we don't want the small town feel here in Littleton. So anyways, thank you very much. And I forgot to say my name. I'm Linda Knufe in District 4. And thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Appreciate it. Paul? We're going to take a break.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and new council. Paul Bingham, 236 West Delaware Circle. 2 is the operative word here. Too high. 30 feet is the regular residential height limit. This thing's going to 45. Too little setbacks, 1 foot, 3 feet, 3 feet between, 6 feet between houses. That's ridiculous. I wouldn't want to live there. Too close to 6 feet between houses. 50% open space, 40% of which is concentrated in one place in a park. Surroundings very dense. It's a really, really crammed up neighborhood up there. I've gone through there a zillion times picking up grandkids from that charter school up there, which is a very good school, by the way. I think Denver has banned these kind of slot houses. You might think that over. The Economic Development Department, do not rush into this thing. Councilman Fay has said the same thing about a property out close to where she lives. Walmart has also been brought up. I've got an example from a long time ago. Courtesy Ford wanted to build a dealership on South Broadway. I got my neighbors and we came down here and raised a bunch of hell and killed that. Got a lot of flack for that because we were bad guys for being against something. The result was they're down on South County Line Road where they belong. And where they went is also what it should have been. Anyway, this is a very nice industrial campus. We'd like to keep it that way. I agree very much with letters from Loretta, one of which was on their table, and Pam, please don't rezone this. Thank you.
Thank you. That is it for the list. Is there anybody else not signed up? Mr. Atwood.
Good evening, City Council. I'm Frank Atwood. I live at 7094 South Castilla Street. About 10 years ago, I was part of the Littleton Growth Discussion Group, and we did a tour walking with Mr. Donovan Odell and with Representative Joe Rice around the Norgren property to just get a feel for the future development of the neighborhood. And I'm grateful that it has continued to stay zoned industrial and non-residential. Previous councils, as both Pam Chadbourne and Linda Knufinke have pointed out, have tried to draw what I'll call resident-less lines in the sand and have not stayed true to their attempts to stay both industrial and commercial rather than succumb to residential. You're once again a fresh council every 2 years, and I'd like you to think about your future budgets and that currently you're enjoying salad times, good times, and are able to have the discussions with Tiffany because you've got good budgeting and you have not killed the golden geese. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Do we have anybody else? Okay. At this time, I'd like to take a 5-minute break before we'll hear back from the applicant for just a short bit. But let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break. Cool. Come 6. So it'll be 8:05. 6.
All right, thank you. I appreciate all of the public comment. I appreciate that when something happens in your neighborhood, obviously it means a lot to you, and you want to have a voice in the changes that might be coming. You have all heard from a group of 11 or 12 folks. I just want to remind you that in your packet you also have a petition signed by 26 people that live or work in proximity to the property. I believe you also have a handful, maybe 4 or 5 letters of support that have been received in the previous weeks and months. To maybe 4 or 5 overarching points. Several people commented on density, and I want to remind all of you that our proposed density is less than the surrounding properties. Somebody commented on the pedestrian corridor. I want to remind all of you that we will be creating walks that are wider than those existing. Those walks will be maintained by a homeowners association, so they'll have prompt snow removal. Those walks will be detached from the street, meaning that they will be pulled away from vehicle traffic. Somebody mentioned a comment about short-term rentals. We also have concerns about this, and that is why for the past several years, Richmond American Homes in our form covenants have been including language that prohibits short-term rentals less than 6 months in the communities. We fully intend to do that here. If there are other items that we should address, obviously please let us know. There were several comments about the height. I want to remind everybody that our structures are 3 stories with an optional outdoor living space above that. The heights of the surrounding properties are by and large 2.5, 3, and 3.5 stories, and many of those also have outdoor living space. Some of those outdoor living spaces on the roofs are even covered. Somebody commented on impact fees. If I characterized this as a gift to the city, that wasn't my intention. The impact fees are designed to offset the burden that these homes will generate in the community. We understand that, we know that. My point was just that we are not asking for any relief. We will pay the impact fees as the city requires them. And finally, I appreciate the gentleman from the Norgren property. We have not interacted with him just yet, but we have worked with 1 or 2 other members on his team. We were not aware of a security concern in the buffer space between the properties, but we will certainly work with them to do what's necessary to give them the comfort level they need. I will say, though, that we have had some discussions with maybe some sort of facilities manager about an existing drainage condition overlying the private drive that enters their site. I guess the historical drainage from this undeveloped 8.8 acres has been sort of covering over their private drive and creating a difficult maintenance and icy condition, and that we will fully rectify by improving the drainage in our area. So to bring that point full circle, I look forward to working with the folks from Norgren to address their concerns with the security. I believe we will already be bringing a little bit of value to them and helping them address a de-icing situation. If there are any other comments related to the public that you'd like me to answer, I'm happy to do that now. Otherwise, I'll look forward to answering your questions.
Council, do you have anything at this moment? Cool. All right, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you for keeping it short. All right. I do want to make one comment that I'd heard earlier about who introduced the ordinance, and it had Councilmember Elrod and the Mayor Pro Tem. Those names are actually just kind of just put on there. It isn't that something that they brought forward. It's just names that when the city staff, in fact, maybe in the future, we won't even be doing that.
They're the first and second of the reading. Those are the people
so
did. And we were just talking about it, and we're going to remove those.
Yeah.
That completely from the
ordinance. So I don't want
ordinance.
to put any blame on them.
Signify
All right.
anything.
So,
In a second.
so right now, the public hearing is closed. So, but I would like to hear from the Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you to everyone who commented. Thank you to the applicant. I carefully read the materials given to council, including those presented by the applicant. I took a drive around the property just the other day. I have listened to the questions, answers, and comments tonight from all sides. These did not change the thoughts I had from reading our council packet. I believe it's fair that new construction in Littleton should balance, to at least some extent, the civic needs of our city with the market needs of developers. Otherwise, our planning efforts, like in this case, the 2014 citywide plan and Code Section 10223B, are made irrelevant, and when that happens, Littleton can't systematically, efficiently, and strategically reach its goals, which is another way of saying we won't be able to continue providing the best services, amenities, and quality of life for our citizens. We absolutely want and need the right developments in Littleton, but those developers who do business here will meet the city partway. That's not too much to ask, and this proposed development, I believe, does not help Littleton. We know the major needs of our city. Several of them, of course, are included in the code criteria from Section 10223B that council has to focus on in this quasi-judicial decision that's before it tonight. I say of course because the whole point of this code section is to ensure that the city gets some of its civic needs met with these kinds of proposed developments and rezones. Unless the proposal meets the criteria and the code, the rezone cannot be approved. Section B1 says in part, quote, "It is the intent of council that the resulting economies benefit the community," end quote. We need jobs, we need office space, and we especially need sales tax revenues. This development does not get us these things and instead only gets us a nominal amount of property taxes. I do not think it's in the city's best interests to give up one of our last remaining industrial zoned parcels for this kind of residential. I do believe that patience is a virtue. Subsection B2 says, quote, "Meet the growing demands for housing of all types and designs for persons of any social or economic status," end quote. We need affordable housing, workforce housing, downsize housing options for seniors, and starter homes for young families. In our Economic Development Department's analysis of this rezone, it estimates these units would sell for a median price of $538,553, and all of the units would have stairs. That does not meet Littleton's housing needs. Subsection B3 says encourage innovative development by providing for a greater variety and mix of uses, including those which may coexist on the same parcel. For a whole host of good reasons, Littleton wants and needs mixed-use developments in mixed-use corridors where this development would be located. This development, by contrast, would be purely residential. Subsection B4 says, quote, "Require that the nature and intensity of development be supported by adequate transportation network," end quote. We need traffic mitigation in Littleton. The staff report council received estimates this development would add 816 vehicle trips daily, but that does not come with any significant infrastructure improvements. In the past, Littleton often put development before infrastructure. That's never worked out, and traffic congestion is now a major issue in our city. I'm voting no. I believe this proposal meets the developer's market needs and does not meet Littleton's civic needs as those are set forth in Code Section 10223B.
Mayor, just from a process perspective, we don't have a motion on the table yet. Are we?
Open discussing right now. If you have any questions with the applicant, I think we can still do that at this time. Cool. Unless you want to make a motion.
I'd like to make a motion.
Please do.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion to deny the ordinance on second reading for the Delaware and Powers Development rezoning request for 241 West Powers Avenue.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Council, let's discuss.
Yeah, this would be a great time. I mean, we're in a tough situation, obviously. This property, what the public hasn't seen is this letter from Cushman Wakefield, which talks about the history of the property. And it goes back to 1990. This property became available. And I think Norgren and, at that time it was Cushman Wakefield, went out there and looked for a viable tenant. And they haven't found a viable tenant. And they're not going to find a viable tenant, according to a gentleman that's been doing this business for 25 years. I think the applicant's made a very compelling argument about why this is the right fit for this piece of property. I'm fully going to support it. There's some other things out there. You know, I look around and I see 4 or 5 people from the neighborhood that came in to speak against it. What about the rest of the people? You know, I understand. You know, maybe people are shy for whatever reason, but we have 4 or 5 people, and the rest of the people are from outside the district, so they're just supporting their personal view for that neighborhood. It's not a viable commercial space. It will never be a viable commercial space. Nobody's going to move in there. And that's been proven for the last 30 years. It's been on the market that long, more than that, 30 years, yeah. We need some more housing. Granted, this is not affordable housing, but it is good housing. And what's affordable today? Well, maybe $450,000 is an affordable house today compared to other developments and be built out there. So I think we can discuss affordability. There is 4.5 acres of green space. I think what they've put in there is a very good product. I'm not concerned about the height restrictions because I think it's right in there with what the residents around them are doing already. We're going to be having the same discussion if they decide to put a distribution center in there. They're not going to want the traffic going in and out of that facility. We're going to have the same discussion if they put a manufacturing plant in there because it's too much noise. I think it's time we do something with this property and give some new neighbors an opportunity to live in Littleton. 85 units is not a big ask. So I'm going to vote yes on this, and I think the rest of that, Jason did a good job of addressing the other concerns regarding safety and some of the other things out there. So, thank you.
Go ahead.
I've heard two conflicting things here. A council member who just spoke said that property's been on the market for 30 years, and the Director of Economic Development, would you please say when it went on the market?
According to one of the representatives of Cushman Wakefield, it was confirmed that 2011 was the first time the property was put on the market.
So we have our own Director of Community Development that says it's been on the market since 2011. That's significantly different from what the council member who just spoke said. We had the folks from Richmond said that the property's been stagnant for decades, and I believe that when a property is not on the market, it's not stagnant. And so that means it's been on the market for 8 years. And again, listening to our Director of Economic Development, who is the professional that the city has in place to deal with these kinds of things, that's not a long time. One of my major concerns about the speaking about this isn't going to cost the city very much is the frequent referral back to the HOA will pay for this and that. I wonder who pays the HOA fees. I think that's the property owners, and I think that increases the cost of living there. And so then we have the price estimated by the mayor pro tem at $500 and some $1,000. And then add on to that, it's going to be significant HOA fees, I would guess, and no one has mentioned Metro District. But I know when I ask about, in a study session some months ago, ask if it was going to be an HOA or a Metro District, I did not get a clear answer. And so I would guess that it's going to be Metro District fees morphing into HOA just because we have a trend for that. Oh, let's see. I want to go back to, I didn't ask you a question. I think you need to sit down.
We'll take care of it. Go ahead.
I think our primary issue here is, as identified again by the Economic Development Department, is the future opportunity. And we've heard a number of times, once the property goes to residential, it is gone. It's not going to become anything else. Let's see. And then overriding everything else, we have spent months and months and months on community character. Community character. And by putting single-family housing in an existing industrial and multifamily neighborhood, we are significantly changing the community character. I think we tend to think of community character as protecting single-family homes in a suburban, sprawling atmosphere. But I think we also have a community character going on there with an industrial park area with surrounding multifamily housing that pertains to that industry. And to put single-family housing in there, it violates community character. And that's all I have.
I don't support this. Looking at the criteria we use to evaluate this property, the first thing talks about economies that benefit the community, and I think we heard from our economic department that this would not be in our best financial interest in the long run. Looking at number 3, looking at mixed uses, including ones that coexist on the same parcel. There is variety in terms of a macro scale in that there's no other homes like this in the area, but not on the micro scale. These are all the same kinds of homes. Looking at the Progress Park neighborhood, their goals are to preserve the existing character of the neighborhood as much as possible, especially the single-family home in those areas. Limit new high-density residential development. So I think based on that, which a lot of this falls under, I think it's not in the best interest to change the zoning at this time.
Comments?
I'm on the fence. I understand that this property is currently zoned industrial. If it was to stay industrial, who's to say some business comes in that's got smokestacks or something that's less desirable for that neighborhood? How would the surrounding residents feel about that? However, like Scott, I wish that this proposal included affordable housing options for that neighborhood. That's a pretty significant price increase. But I understand, too, with the development of that new neighborhood, that it could potentially provide newer, creative, more development in that surrounding area. So I'm really at kind of a crossroads right now.
Jerry, can I just do a point of clarification?
Sure.
That maybe Denise didn't even read this. This is again from our gentleman at Cushman and Wakefield. However, by the late 1990s, Nordgren had determined it would not expand the site and began quietly marketing the property. That's often how times commercial properties work. You don't necessarily put it on the market for just the sake of putting it on the market. You go out to industries out there to say, hey, are you interested? Would you use this? There's some other compelling verbiage in here.
Go ahead and let Councilmember.
One second, I've already talked with Karina.
I'm okay with him clarifying.
So, and this, again, from a 25-year commercial executive, my opinion is that even if this were the last site in Littleton for industrial or commercial development, a user will simply choose a different municipality to go based upon this location. Some sites are just not meant for business. That holds a lot of weight for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So for me, I really look at that area and what's been happening there lately. So if you look at companies like Tesla choosing to come to Littleton. And remember, Tesla is not just an automotive company, it's an energy company. So the way companies do business these days is different. It's diversified. And so it's not one product. And so I could foreseeably see someone like Tesla needing to expand in some way. And it'd be great to have an opportunity available to them. It sounds like they've already used this property for parking, at least for now. But the point is, there's growth potential with the company and could likely look in the area. And Wells Fargo, the Wells Fargo building just went through redevelopment and is bringing in new tenants. We have a new trade school that is going in for Littleton High School. So there's a lot of activity and good positive stimulus already happening in that area. We are a city that has boundaries. We can't expand. And so we really have to ensure we have the opportunity to create jobs in Littleton. This is an area, I have a lot of respect for Cushman and Wakefield. I have a lot of respect for this letter as well, but something that we now bring to our decision-making, which we did not always have in the past, is an economic analysis, which is a very important factor for me that I am considering. Is this better than what's there now? Absolutely, but I do feel that there's an opportunity cost to developing or converting this into residential and foregoing industrial and commercial there. So that is the basis of my decision tonight.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and chime in here if I may. I thought the economic analysis by the city was excellent. Thank you very much. I also think the response from the applicant was very good too. It really does help with a lot of that stuff. And the applicant did say, and I agree with, that their statement regarding housing diversity does not simply mean low-income housing and senior housing. I agree with that statement. Affordability is what those fit into a price range, and that's the product that they buy. In that particular neighborhood, there are lots of low-income, affordable units over there for many people. I've been the rep for the council representative for 8 years now, and before that, the planning commission. So I heard a lot from that surrounding neighborhood. Some of the folks that spoke tonight, I've heard from them over the years. In that immediate area, there's at least anywhere from 500 to 1,200 apartments that are considered affordable over there. So the fact that this one does not fit into the low-income affordable, that part doesn't bother me. I guess what concerns me is the fact that we would lose any potential income down the road. As you mentioned, the Walmart location where that was being discussed. We had no idea what would go in there, but Walmart was that business model was turned down, and we ended up with something good. That property at County Line and east of Broadway, that was another property that some folks came in, and we turned that down for residential, and now some businesses are moving in there. There's others. I think that's the end of my comments. Did anybody else have any other comments before we go to a vote? Are we ready to go to a vote? Because I want to remind council that the motion on the table is to deny. So that means a yes vote, you're saying no to the applicant. That's a yes vote. And a no vote means you agree with the applicant and you're in favor of the property. So it's remember that. So it's a yes is denying and a no is in favor.
I would like to clarify that. A yes is to keep it what it is.
A yes vote denies the applicant.
And so it keeps the property zoned as it is right now.
That would be correct.
Okay.
And then a no vote is in favor of the applicant. Okay, is there any other questions? So you have that, Wendy? You have everything? Is council, are you ready to vote?
Well, maybe just a quick point of clarification. I think if, for whatever reason, the noes have it in this vote, we're going to have another motion to approve the rezone.
That would be correct.
Okay.
So first, we're going to vote, right? So remember, yes vote is in favor of the motion, right? Okay. All right, everybody got on there?
The vote is 6 in favor of denial, with Councilmember Driscoll voting no. The motion carries 6-1.
So we don't have to have another motion. No, that's it. Is there anything else Council? Staff, did you have anything you wanted to add to the meeting?
No, do not.
City Attorney?
Nothing for the city attorney.
Staff? Council?
We've already done it.
If that is it, then we are, sir?
I would make a point of order here, Mr. Mayor. I think we've closed the public hearing.
Yeah, it's been closed, sorry. I just wanted to thank you all. No, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Good presentation. All right, we are adjourned.